Under the green fire of the Arctic sky, Lieutenant Emma Hayes, a Navy SEAL forged by duty and loss, trudges across an endless field of snow. Beside her walks Shadow, a black German shepherd, whose amber eyes still burn with loyalty and faith. Beneath their boots, buried deep in the frozen earth, lies something humanity was never meant to find: a living nuclear heart that breathes like a god and hungers like a storm. When betrayal strikes and the last line between man and machine begins to blur, Emma must choose between orders and mercy, between the weapon she's sworn to destroy and the miracle she cannot explain. As bullets fade and the Aurora flares above, she discovers that faith can survive even when the world freezes over, and that sometimes God sends his angels not with wings, but with paws and courage enough to face the impossible. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe and leave a like. Your faith keeps these stories of courage and hope alive. May God bless you, and may his light guide you through every storm. The wind howled across Frostline Base, dragging veils of snow that scraped the steel hangars like ghostly fingers. The morning light hadn't yet broken through the Arctic mist, and the world felt muted, gray, cold, and waiting for something to happen. Lieutenant Emma Hayes pulled her parka tighter as her breath fogged in front of her face. At 32, she carried the quiet authority of someone who had seen too much to be easily impressed. Her features were sharp, hazel eyes framed by dark lashes, a narrow scar running along her left cheekbone from a mission gone wrong in Syria. That scar wasn't just a mark. It was a reminder that survival often came at the cost of innocence. Beneath her calm professionalism, Emma hid an undercurrent of restlessness, a fatigue that wasn't from cold or duty, but from knowing how fragile order really was. At her side moved Shadow, a 5-year-old black German shepherd with eyes the color of old amber and the posture of a creature born for command. He wasn't large for his breed, but his muscles coiled with restrained precision. His every step mirrored Emma's. The rhythm between them was so synchronized it seemed choreographed. Shadow had saved her once in Kandahar, dragging her from a collapsed tunnel after an explosion. Since then, their bond had transcended the handler-dog dynamic. To outsiders, he was a military asset. To Emma, he was the last living soul she trusted without condition. The blare of the intercom cut through the wind. "Lieutenant Hayes, checkpoint sweep, Hangar 4. Clearance before departure." She pressed her comms. "On it." Hangar 4 was a cathedral of metal and echoes, lined with rows of silver transport cases, each marked with radiation warnings and frost-bitten serial numbers. These were Boreas Facility's uranium cores, sealed for transfer to a secure site in Nevada. The air inside shimmered faintly from temperature differentials, the kind that made even breath feel radioactive. Standing at the center of it all was Chief Security Officer Tom Rourke, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s with a gray beard that matched his uniform. Once a Marine, now a bureaucrat in uniform. He had the kind of humorless face that years of command carved out. Rourke was efficient, but cautious to the point of paranoia. He'd lost 2 men during a smuggling sting a decade earlier, and that ghost followed him like a shadow, colder than the snow outside. "Morning, Hayes," he greeted, voice gravelly. "Your boy ready to dance?" "Always," Emma replied, unclipping Shadow's lead. "Seek, Shadow." The dog moved like a whisper between the rows of metal cases. His nose hovered inches from the polished surfaces, inhaling in rhythmic bursts. The handlers nearby, young technicians with wide eyes, paused their chatter to watch the legendary K-9 work. At first, everything was routine. Shadow checked one case, then another. Tail neutral, ears twitching in concentration. Emma followed, close behind, gloved hand resting loosely on the leash. She was already thinking ahead, to the coffee she'd promised herself after the sweep, when Shadow stopped. It wasn't gradual. One step, then stillness. He was standing in front of a single green military duffel, distinct among the sterile silver. 3 women stood behind it, each in dark snow fatigues, dusted with frost. They had just arrived from a recon mission in the Yukon sector. "Problem, Lieutenant?" The tallest of the 3, Sergeant Mia Collins, spoke first. She was around Emma's age, athletic, with cropped auburn hair and the casual arrogance of someone used to leading. Her blue eyes were steady, but her jaw tightened when Shadow let out a low growl. "Probably just a scent overlap," Emma said, though her tone was thin. "Shadow, move on." But Shadow didn't move. His growl deepened into a rumbling vibration that Emma could feel through the leash. His ears flattened, his body stiffened. His eyes locked onto that duffel as if it had a heartbeat. "Mia, what's in the bag?" Rourke asked. "Standard gear, sir," she said quickly. "Sample containment, data drives, cold packs, nothing classified." Behind her, Corporal Dana Reese, a compact brunette with sharp cheekbones and an old bullet scar on her neck, shifted uneasily. Ensign Laura Beck, the youngest, pale and quiet, kept her eyes down. Shadow barked, short, explosive, commanding. The sound echoed off the hangar walls, silencing every other noise. Emma froze. That bark was no mistake. It was the bark that had saved her life in Kandahar, the one that meant danger. Now. "Hayes!" Rourke barked. "Control your dog!" She crouched beside Shadow, whispering, "Easy, boy. Easy." But the shepherd's body was a spring wound tight. His nostrils flared, his hackles rose, and he gave a warning snarl that made even Rourke take a step back. Emma's pulse hammered in her ears. She trusted this animal more than any human alive. If Shadow said there was something wrong, then there was something very wrong. "Mia," she said slowly. Standing, "Open the bag." The sergeant hesitated. "With respect, ma'am, that's classified equipment. Open the bag." Rourke gestured to 2 guards. "Do it!" They approached cautiously. The metal clasps snapped open. A hiss of cold vapor spilled out as the duffel's lining released its seal. Inside were standard military containers, neatly arranged. But beneath them, at the base, was a thin crack in the insulation foam, glowing faintly blue. The Geiger counter clipped to Rourke's belt began to tick. Then it screamed. Every person in the hangar froze. Emma's breath caught as the eerie blue light pulsed once, as though the bag itself had a heartbeat. Shadow barked again, loud and certain, his voice cutting through the alarm like judgment. Emma's hand went to her sidearm. Her mind raced through possibilities. Mishandled uranium, a broken Bipotola core. But no, this light was alive, flickering irregularly, as if responding to sound. Rourke's voice dropped into disbelief. "Hayes, what the hell is that?" Emma didn't answer. Her eyes met Shadow's, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the dog was asking the same question. And then, the hangar lights flickered. The temperature gauge on the wall dropped 5 degrees in less than 10 seconds. And somewhere deep under the ice, something answered the light with a distant mechanical hum. The isolation wing of Frostline Base was a sterile place, built for containment rather than comfort. The walls were white steel, the kind that seemed to swallow sound, and the fluorescent lights hummed like nervous insects. Emma Hayes stood on the far side of the glass, arms folded, her reflection hovering faintly over the three women seated inside the interrogation room. Beyond the barrier, snow continued to fall, thick, silent, and endless. Mia Collins sat with her elbows on her knees, chin down, hands clasped loosely as though holding something invisible. Her red hair was tied back now, but stray strands framed her face, damp with sweat despite the cold. She looked every bit the field demolition expert she was. Lean, controlled, the kind of woman who'd once defused bombs while her comrades held their breath. Yet beneath that practiced calm, Emma sensed turbulence. The set of her jaw wasn't defiance. It was exhaustion mixed with guilt. Next to her, Dana Reese leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowed, the tip of a scar just visible under her collar. She had the steady hands of a sniper, the kind of woman who could line up a shot through a sandstorm. Her expression betrayed skepticism rather than fear. She wasn't intimidated, but she was watching Emma as if calculating her range. The youngest, Laura Beck, barely 24, looked out of place among them. Her fingers twisted the hem of her jacket, her pale face drawn tight, freckles stark against her skin. She looked like she wanted to speak, but every time she inhaled, Mia's glance silenced her. Chief Rourke's voice broke through the quiet. They've all denied carrying anything unauthorized. Says the light came from residual isotopes. His tone was clipped, professional, but his eyes betrayed unease. We sent samples from the bag to the lab. The counter's still misfiring. Emma's gaze stayed fixed on the women. A false reading doesn't make the light disappear, Chief. Something's inside that casing. Rourke sighed. The motion deepened the lines in his face. You think they're lying? I think they're scared, she said softly. And that's worse. Shadow sat at her heel, perfectly still but alert, his amber eyes fixed on the glass. Every so often, his ears twitched toward the sound of a voice, Mia's especially. He remembered scents as others remembered faces, and something about her triggered unease. Emma rested a gloved hand on his head. The dog didn't move. Behind her, a new voice emerged, a smooth tenor with a hint of New England refinement. If we're playing judge and jury already, maybe I should be in the room. Emma turned to see Commander Alan Pierce, the base's operations director. He was in his 40s, tall, with the kind of athletic build that comes from years of habit rather than training. His hair, once black, now streaked with silver, framed a face both handsome and cold. A deep crease between his brows suggested a man perpetually at odds with the world. Pierce was the sort who had once believed in systems and now believed only in control. Commander, Emma said, nodding stiffly. This is a containment procedure, not a tribunal. Containment? Pierce's gray eyes flicked toward the glass. We've already grounded every flight out of Frostline. The Pentagon's asking questions I can't answer. I need to know if that glow is a radiation leak or a goddamn miracle. Emma's lips tightened. Miracles don't hum at 2.7 millisieverts. Pierce stared at her for a long moment, then smirked faintly. That's why I like you, Lieutenant. No poetry, no panic. He stepped closer to the glass, studying the women. Especially her, he said, nodding at Laura. That one's shaking like she's sitting on a confession. Emma followed his gaze. Laura's eyes darted up just then, meeting Emma's through the glass. There was fear there, not of punishment, but of something else entirely. Pierce left to answer a call. The door closed behind him with a hiss. Emma took a breath and pressed the intercom. Sergeant Collins, tell me about your mission in Yukon. Mia looked up. Her voice, when it came, was measured. We were sent to retrieve a sample core from an abandoned research outpost near the Beaufort Ridge. The lab was collapsed. Ice damage. No survivors. We found a containment cylinder lodged in the generator room. It matched DOE specs, so we brought it back. Unlogged retrieval? Emma asked. It was cleared under Field Authorization B9, Mia replied. Rourke frowned. There's no such code in this base's registry. Mia's jaw clenched. Then check the higher one. Emma exchanged a glance with Rourke. You're saying someone outside Frostline gave you that order? Silence. Then Dana spoke up, voice low. We got a transmission from a secure satellite band. Encrypted. Said it came from Directive Polaris. Mia believed it. Emma felt a chill, unrelated to the temperature. Polaris was a code name whispered in black budget circles. Allegedly, a Department of Energy shadow directive dealing with nuclear biogenics. Officially, it didn't exist. You should have reported that immediately, Rourke snapped. We didn't know what we were carrying, Mia shot back, her composure cracking. We thought it was training material. The casing was sealed. We couldn't open it without authorization. Emma studied her, searching for deceit, but all she found was panic buried under professionalism. Then why hide it in a standard duffel? Mia hesitated. Because it wasn't supposed to look like a core. Whoever sent us didn't want it noticed. Before Emma could respond, the intercom buzzed. Lieutenant Hayes, report to Lab 2, Priority 1. She left Rourke to continue questioning and walked briskly down the corridor, Shadow almost padding beside her. The lab was 2 floors below, a chamber of glass walls and steel tables glowing under sterile light. Inside, Dr. Evelyn Park, the base's senior physicist, stood over a containment pod. Dr. Park was in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair coiled in a bun and sharp, analytical eyes behind frameless glasses. Her movements were deliberate, precise, as though she feared her own brilliance might spill. Once a leading researcher at Los Alamos, she had resigned after a reactor meltdown in which 2 technicians died under her supervision. Since then, she'd sought redemption in the frozen isolation of Frostline. Doctor, Emma said, you called me. Park didn't look up. Your dog was right, she murmured. There's something in that casing. On the table, the cracked uranium core from Mia's duffel sat inside a lead box. Thin tendrils of blue light licked from the fracture, dancing like bioluminescent veins. The air around it shimmered faintly, bending light like heat waves. Emma felt her stomach tighten. What is it? I don't know, Park said. It's not pure uranium. It's bonded with an organic lattice, some kind of bioreactive compound. I've never seen anything like it. Could it be biological contamination? Park finally met her gaze. If it's alive, Lieutenant, it's not alive the way we understand it. The lights flickered. The hum deepened, vibrating through the floor. Shadow growled, backing away from the table. Emma's heart pounded. Is it reacting to sound? She asked. Park turned toward the monitors, each one now pulsing faint blue, syncing to the rhythm of their voices. No, she whispered. It's listening. The hum shifted, lowering in tone, almost melodic. From the speakers overhead came a faint crackle of feedback. Then a single, artificial word formed out of static. Cold. Emma's blood froze. Park's face went white. Shadow barked once, sharp and terrified. And then, the containment pod's sensors spiked, temperature plummeting as frost spread outward from the box like living veins crawling across the floor. The storm outside had turned the night into a living thing. Wind howled through the fractured vents of Frostline, like the throat of some buried beast, and the world beyond the base's reinforced doors was swallowed by sheets of white and static. Lieutenant Emma Hayes pulled her hood down as she descended the narrow staircase that led to the underbelly of Borea Station, the original research wing buried half a mile under ice. The air here was damp, metallic, and cold enough to bite through the thick fabric of her gloves. Her breath came out in short, foggy bursts, each one hanging in the dim yellow light that flickered from the emergency bulbs overhead. Shadow padded ahead, his dark coat glinting in the half-light, every movement precise and alert. He sniffed the grates, the air, the rusted door frames, reading the ghosts of the place. Emma trusted that nose more than any sensor on base. She brushed a hand over the old wall markings, faded symbols that once meant safety, but now looked like warnings. The access tunnel narrowed until they reached a heavy blast door sealed by a digital lock, its display covered in a thin frost bloom. Emma wiped it clean and slid her ID card through the scanner. The screen blinked red. She frowned, then tried again. Still red. Shadow let out a low growl. "Easy," she whispered, though her pulse had already picked up speed. The door had been accessed recently. There was condensation where the frost had melted in uneven patches, still wet. Someone had been here, and not long ago. She opened her wrist console and cross-checked the entry logs with the station's mainframe. What appeared on her visor made her heart clench. 2 hours before the last flight from Yukon touched down. The same flight Sergeant Mia Collins claimed to be on. Her security credentials had been used to unlock this very door. Emma swallowed a curse. "You've been busy, Sergeant," she muttered, keying an override. The door groaned open, its mechanisms reluctant after years of neglect. Inside was a tunnel that sloped downward, lined with ribbed metal and faint blue light strips embedded in the floor. The hum of generators grew louder, vibrating through her boots. Frostline's official schematics didn't list any structure beyond this point. She switched on her shoulder lamp and descended, Shadow following silently, muscles taut. At the bottom of the incline lay a subterranean chamber, wide, circular, and filled with machinery that looked decades old, yet strangely operational. At the center was a nuclear cooling unit, its turbines still spinning slowly under layers of frost. The glass display over the reactor core pulsed with faint light, the same impossible blue she had seen in Mia's duffel. Emma exhaled sharply. "God!" Shadow's ears flattened. The dog crouched, hackles bristling, a low vibration rumbling in his chest. Emma followed his gaze. In the thin layer of dust coating the metal floor were footprints, 3 sets, heading toward the core, then back out toward the auxiliary corridor to the east. Someone had come here to retrieve something, or to leave something behind. Emma tapped her comm. "Command, this is Hayes. I'm in Boreas lower section. We've got an unregistered facility powered and active. I need security detail and containment team now." Static answered her. No voice, no signal. Just a hiss that crawled into her ear like cold fingers. "Of course," she muttered. "Storms fried the uplink." Shadow's growl deepened. He moved toward the far wall, where a half-opened service hatch leaked faint heat. Emma approached carefully, hand on her sidearm. She crouched and swung the hatch wider. Inside was a compact maintenance drone, deactivated, its camera eye cracked and its claw arm twisted. Someone had disabled it deliberately. On its side was the mark of Orion Dynamics, a private defense contractor notorious for its classified energy experiments. Emma straightened slowly. Orion. The same company whose logo Shadow had dragged from the wrecked insulation fabric earlier. She stared at the symbol. 3 intersecting rings, faintly embossed in the frost, and felt the world tilt. Orion had gone dark 5 years ago after a congressional investigation into nuclear hybrid tech, a fusion of bioorganic computing with radiation containment. The project had supposedly been dismantled. The name Polaris Directive suddenly made too much sense. Her stomach tightened as a realization hit her. This wasn't a rogue smuggling ring. This was reconstruction. Someone was trying to reassemble a weapon that had been erased from the record. The hum of the core intensified. A low resonance that seemed to vibrate the air itself. The temperature gauge on Emma's wrist began to fluctuate. 24 digged, then abruptly, she felt sweat bead along her neck. This shouldn't be possible, she whispered. Then the light in the chamber dimmed. From the reactor's glass, something stirred. A faint, shifting silhouette, like liquid shadow pressing against the surface from inside. The blue light flared brighter, then dimmed again, sinking to the rhythm of her heartbeat. Shadow, she breathed. The dog barked once, sharp, then backed toward the stairwell. His instinct screamed retreat. Emma hesitated, then took one careful step closer. Her reflection warped across the reactor glass. Beneath it, she could swear she saw a face. Pale, feminine, eyes closed. Then, faintly, like a whisper through the hum, came a voice. Find. The second. Emma stumbled back, heart pounding. The reactor's light surged violently, casting the whole room in electric blue. The cooling pipes hissed, spraying vapor. She grabbed Shadow's harness and pulled him toward the exit. They reached the upper corridor, just as the floor vibrated under them. Then a section of wall burst outward in a blast of heat and frost. A coolant valve exploded, sending shards of metal across the passage. Emma hit the deck, shielding her face. Shadow pressed against her side. From the comm channel, a burst of static resolved into a faint voice. Lieutenant Hayes, this is Commander Pierce. Report. We just lost Boreas power grid. What the hell happened down there? Emma coughed, still staring at the blue glow leaking from the tunnel. Sir, whatever's in that core, it's not inert. It's active. It's communicating. There was a pause. Say again? I think it's aware. The comm went silent again. Shadow whined softly, his muzzle pressed against her gloved hand. She glanced down at him and saw frost clinging to his fur, small crystals glinting like stars. He had been close enough to the core to be irradiated, but the readings on her detector showed nothing. Instead, his pulse was steady, normal. The radiation was gone. Absorbed. The implication hit her like a weight. The organism, or whatever lived in that core, had fed on the energy, drained it, then released it as that impossible blue luminescence. She stared back toward the open tunnel, where the glow still pulsed like a heartbeat deep beneath the ice. Something down there was awakening. The storm arrived like the breath of a sleeping god, slow at first, then furious, devouring the horizon in walls of snow that turned Boreas into a white tomb. The sky disappeared. The satellite dishes vanished beneath ice, their red warning lights dimmed to ghosts. Within hours, all communication to the outside world was dead. Only the pulse of the emergency generator broke the silence, a low mechanical heartbeat echoing through steel corridors that now felt like the veins of something alive and waiting. Lieutenant Emma Hayes stood in the command alcove of the safe bunker, her reflection fractured across the frostbitten glass. Her hair clung damply to her temples, her breathing steady but cold. She had spent most of her adult life surviving chaos, but the kind that came from men, the predictable kind. This was different. This storm was no act of weather. It felt like judgment. At her feet lay Shadow, his black coat glistening with meltwater, his golden eyes fixed on the sealed steel door that led to the upper deck. He hadn't rested since the explosion below. Each time the wind howled, his ears twitched, nostrils flaring as if the snow carried a scent invisible to everyone but him. Around them, the bunker hummed with life, or the brittle imitation of it. 4 others shared the space. Chief Tom Rourke, pacing near the generator, grumbling about the loss of signal. Dr. Evelyn Park, bent over a glowing monitor, analyzing the fragments Emma had retrieved from the core chamber. And the 2 restrained women, Sergeant Mia Collins and Corporal Dana Reese, both seated against the wall under the watch of 2 armed technicians. Rourke's patience was long gone. "We're blind and deaf out here," he muttered, rubbing a gloved hand over his bearded jaw. "No uplink, no command feed, no support. We're sitting ducks." Emma didn't answer. Her eyes were on Dana Reese, who sat with her knees drawn to her chest, staring at the floor. The soldier who once radiated calm precision now looked hollow, her lips trembling slightly. Shadows pooled under her eyes like bruises. Emma crouched in front of her. "Talk to me, Corporal. What were you carrying?" Dana didn't lift her gaze. Her voice was raw, cracked with exhaustion. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. They told us it was inert." "Who told you?" Dana hesitated, then looked up. Her eyes were green, sharp, and haunted. "A man from Orion Dynamics. He called himself the Contractor. Said it was a stabilized uranium sample, something that could power satellite defense grids. He paid us through offshore accounts, enough to clear our debts, enough to keep our families safe." She drew a shaking breath. "We were supposed to drop it at a forward base in Anchorage. That's all. No questions." Rourke swore under his breath. "Orion again." Emma leaned closer. "You said families. What did he threaten?" Dana swallowed hard. "He knew everything. Where my sister lived, my niece's school. Said accidents happen in snowstorms." She gave a hollow laugh. "I thought he was bluffing until a week later. Someone mailed me my sister's favorite scarf. Frozen solid." The words hung heavy in the stale air. Even Rourke stopped pacing. Emma felt a pang in her chest. Anger, pity, and something darker. She had seen soldiers break before, but not like this. Not because of fear. Because of love weaponized. At the far end of the room, Laura Beck sat motionless, knees pulled in, eyes fixed on nothing. Her small, pale hands were clasped so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. Her silence was the kind that screamed. Emma rose slowly, turning toward her. "Laura, your name appeared twice in the system logs. Once during the flight manifest, and again 2 hours before takeoff. You used a restricted access card to enter Boreas sub-level C. You want to tell me why?" Laura blinked. For a moment, she didn't seem to hear. Then she whispered, "I was ordered." "By who?" She hesitated. "By someone who isn't supposed to exist." Rourke frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" Laura's voice trembled. "He called himself Director Hale. He wasn't with Orion. He said he worked for the Polaris Continuum, not Directive Continuum. He said Boreas was never shut down. It was sealed." Dr. Park turned from her console, her face drained of color. Polaris Continuum isn't a name you invent, Lieutenant. It was the follow-up to Project Chimera, a theoretical division within the Pentagon that experimented with organic reactors, self-replicating energy matrices. Rourke muttered, "Jesus Christ." Emma pressed on, keeping her tone level. "Laura, where were you taking the sample?" Laura's lip quivered. "To him. He said it was only the first half." She looked up, eyes glistening. "There's another core, isn't there? The one your system detected under the ice." Emma froze. The voice from the reactor echoed in her head. "Find the second." Before she could respond, Shadow's ears shot up. His head snapped toward the outer corridor. He growled, deep and sharp. Rourke moved to the monitor feed. Static. "Motion sensors just tripped in the west access tunnel," he said. "Could be wind interference." Shadow barked once, the sound hard and certain. Emma raised a hand. "It's not the wind." The generator lights flickered. Then, all at once, every bulb in the bunker dimmed. A crackle of static rolled through the comms. Emma's heart thudded. "Backup power online now!" Before anyone could react, Laura moved. In one swift motion, she yanked a smoke grenade from the belt of a stunned technician, pulled the pin, and threw it at the floor. White haze exploded through the room, burning eyes and throats. "Laura, stop!" Emma shouted, coughing through the chemical fog. But Laura was already gone, her small silhouette darting toward the emergency hatch. Shadow lunged after her, barking furiously. Emma followed, vision blurred, lungs on fire. By the time she reached the hatch, it was open, wind howling through the gap. Laura was halfway up the exterior stairwell, swallowed by snow. Her hair whipped like pale threads in the storm. Emma shouted her name, but the sound was stolen by the blizzard. For a brief moment, Laura turned back. Her expression was not fear, it was despair. Then she disappeared into the white. Shadow bounded after her, claws scraping against the icy floor. Emma caught his harness just in time, nearly losing her balance. "No! She won't last out there." Rourke stumbled up behind them, gas mask dangling from his neck. "She's already dead, if she's gone into that storm." Emma looked out into the void. The snow churned like a living ocean. Somewhere beyond it, a faint blue glow pulsed, slow, steady, almost like a heartbeat beneath the ice. Shadow whined low, pressing closer to her leg. Emma's throat tightened. Whatever Laura Beck had run toward, it wasn't freedom. It was calling her. The storm had carved the world into silence and shadow. The wind no longer howled. It whispered, like the voice of something ancient tracing its breath over the tundra. Frostline Base was far behind now, a dim red smudge on the horizon swallowed by white. Lieutenant Emma Hayes moved through the drifts with her rifle slung low, and Shadow trotting ahead, nose buried in the snow, tail stiff with purpose. Each exhale from the dog came out as small ghosts of vapor that vanished instantly. They were following a scent, one metallic, faintly sweet, and threaded with the acrid sting of ozone. It was the scent of radiation. It was also the scent of Laura Beck. The snow had covered her trail within minutes, but Shadow's instincts were older than maps. He paused at intervals, head lifting toward the wind, muscles rippling under his thick black coat. His eyes, a deep amber that caught what little light the sky offered, reflected something wild and knowing. He barked once, short and sharp, and began moving east. Emma followed, her boots crunching into the crusted ice. The air was so cold it bit through fabric and skin alike, but adrenaline kept her from feeling it. Laura was out there, somewhere near the borderline, if the blizzard hadn't already taken her. The storm was dying down now, revealing brief glimpses of jagged mountain ridges to the north and the frozen sprawl of a buried river to the south. A kilometer ahead, faint against the white, something shimmered. A light, low and blue, pulsing like a heartbeat. Emma's hand tightened on her rifle. "Shadow," she murmured. "Track steady." The shepherd gave a soft growl in response, lowering his head again. They reached the light an hour later, and what they found made Emma's chest seize. Laura Beck was on her knees in the snow, her parka ripped open at the shoulder, her face ghostly pale beneath a film of ice. Her gloved hands clutched the handle of the silver case, the same one Shadow had marked hours earlier in Hangar 4. But the case was no longer sealed. The hinges glowed faintly, and the seams leaked thin ibbons of blue vapor that curled upward and vanished in the wind. Emma lifted her rifle instinctively. "Laura!" she shouted over the wind. "Step away from the case!" Laura turned, her eyes wide and fever-bright, the reflection of the light dancing inside her pupils. "You don't understand," she cried. "It's not uranium, it's alive." "Put the case down." Laura shook her head, her voice breaking. "They lied to us. It's the core, the first one. But it's growing." Before Emma could reach her, Shadow barked, the sound cutting through the air like gunfire. The dog's fur stood up along his spine. He advanced, body tense, as if facing something unseen. Then the case shuddered, a faint metallic tremor, like something breathing inside. Emma froze. "Laura, move!" Laura clutched the handle tighter. "I can't. It's bonded. It needs The case burst open. A surge of light exploded outward, not like fire, but like water, rippling in slow motion. The shockwave lifted snow in a spiraling column, hurling Emma backward. Shadow tumbled beside her, rolling before leaping to his feet again. The air filled with static, humming with a frequency that made Emma's teeth ache. When the glow dimmed, Laura was still kneeling, but she wasn't moving. The open case lay beside her, its inner lining peeled away to reveal a small spherical core the size of a human heart, pulsing with a dull, bioluminescent rhythm. The snow around it had melted into a perfect circle of black ice, and within the ice, faint tendrils of light spread outward like roots. Emma staggered to her feet and approached cautiously. Laura's head hung low, breath shallow. Her eyelashes were frozen together. "Laura," Emma whispered, kneeling beside her. "Can you hear me?" Laura's lips moved faintly. "It's awake." Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath her collar. Shadow sniffed her glove, then backed away, whining. The radiation meter on Emma's wrist flickered wildly, then went dead. Emma looked toward the core. The light inside it shifted hue, from blue to a faint, living green. And for an instant, she thought she saw movement, like something turning inside, studying her. Her mind raced. Biological uranium. Bioreactive lattice work. Dr. Park had said it wasn't alive the way they understood life. What if it didn't just absorb energy? What if it remembered it? The wind shifted suddenly. From the distance came the faint hum of an engine. Emma turned sharply. Out of the swirling snow, a pair of headlights appeared, growing larger until a black tracked vehicle emerged. A military snowcrawler, marked not with Frostline insignia, but the tri-ring symbol of Orion Dynamics. "Stay down!" Emma hissed, grabbing Laura's arm and pulling her behind an ice ridge. Shadow crouched beside her, tail stiff, muscles trembling with anticipation. Through the haze, Emma could see 3 figures stepping out of the crawler. The first was a tall man in a long, insulated coat, his hood trimmed with white fur. His posture was straight, almost regal, and his voice when he spoke carried through the storm like steel. "Retrieve the sample. Dispose of any witnesses." Even through the distortion, Emma recognized him from the classified photo files she'd studied years ago. Director Hale. He was in his mid-50s, tall and lean, his face cut from marble, clean-shaven, with high cheekbones and eyes as pale as glacier glass. There was a calm cruelty in them, the kind of coldness that came not from hate, but from conviction. He moved with the stillness of someone who had stopped fearing consequences long ago. Rumor said Hale had once been a physicist before leading Polaris Continuum. Some said he'd watched his family die in a reactor collapse and decided to build a world where human error could be replaced with controlled evolution. 2 armed operatives flanked him. They wore matte gray helmets and exosuits designed for sub-zero operations. One of them carried a containment canister lined with lead shielding. Emma steadied her breathing. If Hale took that core, everything, the deaths, the storm, the collapse of Boreas, would become a footnote in a classified file. Shadow turned his head, waiting for her command. Emma whispered, "Quiet, guard. Move left." The dog crept low through the snow, silent as smoke. Hale's men had almost reached Laura's body when Shadow lunged. His snarl broke the silence. He struck the nearest operative's arm, tearing through fabric and sending the containment case flying. The man fell with a shout, firing a shot that ricocheted off the ice. Emma rose from cover, rifle ready, and fired 2 controlled bursts. One bullet struck the second operative's shoulder, spinning him backward. Hale ducked instinctively, his calm composure cracking for the first time. "Retrieve it!" he barked. The pulsing core had rolled from the snow, glowing brighter now, as though feeding on the chaos around it. Its tendrils of light reached outward, brushing against the fallen operative's leg. He screamed as his body stiffened, his suit crystallizing from the inside out. Within seconds, he was frozen solid, a sculpture of glass and horror. Hale stared at the scene with something between fascination and reverence. "It's evolving," he murmured. Then his eyes found Emma. For one long, suspended heartbeat, they locked eyes through the snow. She saw not a scientist, not a villain, but a believer. A man who thought he was saving the world by reshaping it. Then the core flared again, an expanding pulse of green-white light that consumed the ridge, the crawler, everything. Emma threw herself over Laura's body, shielding her face. Shadow pressed close, growling, his fur standing on end as the world turned blinding. And then, silence. The world beyond the ice had turned to gray silence. Hours had passed since the detonation that engulfed the tundra, but the echoes still lived inside Lieutenant Emma Hayes's mind. The pulse of blinding light, the roar swallowed by snow, and that last image of Director Hale's face dissolving into the storm. Now she sat in the debriefing chamber of Frostline's recovery wing, stripped of her weapons, her uniform replaced by a sterile thermal jacket. Beside her, Shadow lay on the floor. Head between his paws, his golden eyes half open yet restless. The dog had not slept since the event. The door opened with a hiss. A woman stepped in, tall, mid-40s, with the kind of poise that spoke of sleepless years and too many secrets. Special Agent Sarah Kincaid, NCIS. Her black hair was tied into a low knot, a few strands escaping to brush against sharp cheekbones. Her eyes, steel gray with flecks of pale blue, were not unkind but deeply analytical, scanning Emma with the same precision she used for classified case files. She wore a dark wool coat despite the heat of the room and carried a small tablet under her arm. "Lieutenant Hayes," she said, her tone professional yet clipped. "You're lucky to be alive. The board called your report a miracle. I call it containment by circumstance." Emma straightened slightly. "Ma'am, with respect, that miracle burned through 5 meters of ice and wiped a 2-mile radius of communications. If Shadow hadn't dragged me out, I'd be frozen next to whatever's left of Director Hale." Sarah's gaze flicked to the dog. K9 Shadow, age 5. Service record? Commendable. He's seen more classified projects than most of your commanders. He's the only reason I'm still breathing. Sarah sat opposite, setting her tablet on the table. "Then we owe him our thanks, because what you found out there, it changes everything." She tapped the screen, projecting a holographic image into the air. The sphere appeared again, the bioluminescent core rotating slowly. "This is what's left of your sample." Emma's breath caught. "You recovered it?" "Partially," Sarah said. "What was left after the explosion was inert. Half the structure collapsed, but the internal lattice survived. The material isn't purely metallic or organic. It's hybrid. What's fascinating is what it does. It doesn't just generate energy. It absorbs electronic signals, wipes communication systems clean, and scrambles anything running on electromagnetic coordination. That means radar, drones, guided missiles, everything. If weaponized, one of these could make an entire continent blind." Emma felt the weight of the words sink in. That's what Hale wanted, to shut us down from the inside. Sarah nodded slowly. "And he was close. The last encrypted transmissions from the Polaris network went silent 3 hours after your encounter. But we intercepted fragments of their protocol, something they called Project Second Son." "Second Son," Emma repeated. The phrase made her skin crawl. Sarah folded her hands. "I've spent 10 years chasing the ghost of Project Chimera, Lieutenant." Hale's group splintered from it when the Pentagon tried to bury their research. They wanted self-replicating reactors, organic cores that could grow, adapt, and self-repair. But what they created was worse, a living energy field that eats information. They lost control, and the first test site in Greenland vanished from radar. Literally. It wasn't destroyed. It just disappeared from every measurable frequency. Emma leaned forward. "So what I saw, it's not the first time?" "No," Sarah said quietly. "It's the first time one of them spoke." The silence stretched thin between them. Emma replayed the moment in her head, the faint, human-like whisper from the reactor chamber. "Find the second." She shivered. "You think there's another one?" "I don't think," Sarah replied. "I know. Hale wasn't building a weapon. He was trying to awaken something. Every log recovered from Orion Dynamics mentions a pair, the Alpha Core and the Beta Core. You encountered the Alpha." Emma frowned. "And the Beta?" Sarah swiped again. A satellite map flickered on screen. Northern Quebec, near the abandoned Ravenhead facility, an old NORAD outpost. "The Beta Core's signal matches residual radiation from your explosion. It's migrating." "Migrating?" Emma's eyes narrowed. "You mean it's moving on its own?" Sarah looked weary for the first time. "It's not a reactor anymore, Lieutenant. It's a system trying to complete itself." Before Emma could answer, the door slid open again. Commander Alan Pierce entered, still wrapped in his frost-lined uniform. His face was drawn, the corners of his eyes etched with new lines. He nodded stiffly to Sarah, but kept his focus on Emma. "Agent Kincaid," he said, "I want to make it clear. Frost Line is under military command until further notice. We'll cooperate, but my people answer to the Navy, not NCIS." Sarah didn't flinch. "Then perhaps your people should start surviving like the Navy. Boreas was your base, Commander, and you lost it to one man and a dog." Pierce's jaw tightened. He looked at Emma, his tone softer. "You did good work out there, Lieutenant. You also broke half a dozen protocols, commands debating whether to decorate you or ground you indefinitely." "I'll take grounded," she said, "as long as they don't send another team blind into the snow." Sarah closed her tablet, standing. "That's not your decision, Lieutenant. You're being reassigned. To me." Pierce blinked. "Excuse me?" "Hayes and her dog are the only personnel to make direct contact with the Alpha Corps and Soviet exposure. She's now attached to NCIS Special Projects, Counter Bioenergetic Division. She'll report directly to my command." Emma stood as well, torn between disbelief and relief. "And the mission?" Sarah's eyes softened for the first time. "We find the Beta Corps before it finds us." Hours later, the helicopter roared across the Arctic stratosphere, slicing through the final trails of the storm. Inside, the cabin rattled with turbulence. Emma sat near the window, Shadow's head resting on her boot, the rhythmic thrum of the rotors masking her thoughts. Opposite her, Sarah reviewed encrypted files, the pale light from her tablet casting hard angles across her face. "Agent Kincaid," Emma said over the engine noise. "Why you? Why chase something everyone else pretends doesn't exist?" Sarah looked up, her expression unreadable. "Because 15 years ago, I was stationed at Chimera's primary test site in Nevada. We thought we were developing clean energy. Instead, I watched 23 people vanish into thin air when the core collapsed. My husband was one of them." Emma's breath caught. "I'm sorry." Sarah smiled faintly, a small, tired curve. "Don't be. He volunteered. He believed in evolution. I'm just here to make sure no one else gets to play God." Shadow stirred, ears twitching, as if he understood. Emma looked out the window. Below, endless miles of frozen wilderness stretched into infinity. Somewhere under that ice, something pulsed and waited. As the helicopter banked toward Quebec, Sarah's voice came through the comms, steady and calm. "Ravenhead Facility ETA, 40 minutes. We'll land on the southern ridge. Hayes, prep your dog for recon mode. We're going hunting." Emma nodded. "For the Beta Corps?" Sarah's gaze met hers. "No, for whatever's still calling it." Night bled slowly across the frozen expanse, swallowing the wreckage in a pale shimmer of green and violet. The Aurora rippled like a living curtain over the tundra, reflecting off shattered ice and burnt metal. The smell of ozone and gunpowder lingered, heavy and unnatural. Lieutenant Emma Hayes knelt in the snow, her breath trembling in the frigid air as she cradled Shadow against her chest. His thick black fur was slicked with frost and blood, his chest rising shallowly, eyes half-lidded but defiant. He had taken the bullet meant for her, just as he had years ago in Kandahar. The snow around them glowed faintly blue, a soft echo of the dying core nearby. Emma's hands shook as she pressed a torn field dressing against the wound along Shadow's side. "Stay with me, boy," she whispered. Her voice broke, the words misting into the night. "You've got one more fight in you. You always do." Shadow blinked, his tail giving a faint twitch, and pressed his muzzle into her gloved hand, as if to say, "Don't stop now." Behind her, the last traces of the battle hissed in the cold. The snowcrawler lay overturned, flames hissing into steam. The core's pulse had dimmed, but its faint luminescence, still painted the ice with an unearthly glow. Near it, the body of Mia Collins lay motionless, half buried in drifting snow. The once proud SEAL who had laughed through gunfire and storms was gone, her face oddly peaceful, as if the final bullet had released her from guilt rather than taken her life. From the distance, the rhythmic chop of rotor blades cut through the air. Emma looked up, squinting as a helicopter descended through the Aurora haze. The downwash sent snow whirling around her like a halo of broken glass. The aircraft bore the insignia of NCIS. As it landed, the side door swung open, and Agent Sarah Kincaid stepped out, her dark coat snapping in the wind. Her features were drawn tight, framed by the electric glow of the northern lights. "Emma!" she shouted over the wind, her boots crunching on the ice as she approached. "Are you hurt?" Emma shook her head. "Shadows hit. Mia's dead. The core, it's different. It stopped pulsing." Sarah crouched beside the wreckage, her gloved fingers brushing against the scorched snow near the core. The sphere was cracked, its glow reduced to a soft pulse like the dying ember of a star. Inside, faint veins of light still writhed, sluggish but alive. "We need containment immediately," Sarah said, signaling toward the chopper. Two tech agents emerged, one tall, the other slight, carrying a reinforced cryo capsule. The taller one, Agent Roland Havers, was in his late 30s, broad-shouldered with a thick beard that did little to hide the burn scars trailing down one side of his neck. His eyes were ice blue but tired, the eyes of a man who'd seen too many missions go wrong. Once an EOD specialist before losing half his team in a lab breach, Havers carried every movement with deliberate caution, as if the world itself were a bomb waiting to detonate. The smaller agent, Dr. Lena Ortega, was a biochemist barely past 30, olive-skinned with short-cropped hair, the color of chestnuts, and nervous hands that never stopped moving. Her brown eyes darted between the core and shadow, flickering with curiosity and fear. She was brilliant, Sarah's top recruit, but untested in field chaos. "Contain it carefully," Sarah ordered. "Radiation secondary. The real threat is signal bleed." Havers knelt, producing a carbon-titanium mesh and slowly lowering it over the sphere. As the material touched the core, a thin streak of light ran up his glove, and he flinched. "It's warm," he muttered, "like it's breathing." "Seal it," Sarah snapped. Emma watched silently as the containment unit closed around the dying core. The faint hum faded, replaced by the dull thud of the capsule locking shut. Then, for the first time in hours, true silence returned. Sarah turned to Emma. "You said Mia was the leader?" Emma nodded, voice low. "She was working for Hale, or thought she was. I think he used her as a decoy, to buy time for the beta core to move." Sarah's eyes darkened. "Then this wasn't the end?" "No," Emma said quietly. "It's the beginning of something worse." Sarah rose, pulling her radio headset down. "Kincaid to command. Package recovered. Hostiles neutralized. Prep containment at Site Phoenix." She looked back at Emma, her expression softening. "You and your dog. Get on the chopper. That's an order." Emma hesitated. Her gaze dropped to Shadow, whose breathing had slowed further. The snow beneath him was streaked pink. She whispered something under her breath, a prayer, maybe, or an apology. Then she lifted him carefully into her arms. He was heavier than she remembered, or maybe she was just more tired than she'd ever been. In the helicopter, the hum of the engine drowned out thought. Sarah sat across from her, the core capsule secured beside them. Its surface vibrated faintly, emitting a low frequency Emma could almost feel in her teeth. Lena Ortega was typing on her tablet, muttering about temperature thresholds and energy retention, while Havers adjusted the safety straps with methodical precision. "Agent Kincaid," Lena said suddenly, glancing up. "The readings are off the charts. It's not dying, it's stabilizing. Whatever energy it absorbed during the firefight, it's feeding on it." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Keep it cold. If it starts to spike, eject it mid-air." Lena hesitated. "That could cause another detonation." "Then pray it doesn't come to that," Sarah said flatly. Emma stroked Shadow's fur, her fingers trembling. The dog's breathing was faint but steady. She leaned close, whispering, "You held the line, buddy. You did your job." The helicopter climbed higher, banking south toward the faint lights of the facility. Below them, the Aurora reflected off the ice fields, vast and silent. Yet beneath that beauty, something stirred. The faintest flicker of a second light far to the north, deep beneath the snow. Emma saw it for only a moment, but she knew. Another pulse, another heartbeat. Sarah saw it too. She didn't speak, but her hand tightened on the strap beside her. The Beta Core wasn't dormant. It was calling. As the helicopter disappeared into the clouds, the tundra below glowed briefly, a whisper of blue threading through the endless white, like the promise of a second sun waiting to rise. When the storm finally broke and the Aurora faded from the northern sky, Emma knelt beside her loyal companion, her gloved hand resting gently on Shadow's still chest. Around them, the world was silent again. Not the silence of death, but the kind that follows a miracle. The faint pulse of the recovered core shimmered softly through the snow, like a heartbeat in the frozen earth. And in that moment, beneath the endless heavens, she felt something greater than science, something divine. Perhaps the light humanity seeks to create has always been a reflection of the one that already guides us, the light of grace, of love, of faith that survives even in the coldest places on earth. Emma didn't know whether what happened that night was born of man or miracle, but she knew this. She had been spared, not by strength or luck, but by a force that still whispers through creation, the hand of God working quietly through courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. As she looked at the first glow of dawn spilling across the horizon, she whispered into the wind, "If light can survive the storm, then so can we." If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in second chances, someone who needs to be reminded that miracles still happen in the quiet corners of our world. Tell us in the comments. When was the last time you felt protected by something greater than yourself? Subscribe to our channel for more stories of faith, courage, and the mysterious bond between humans and their loyal guardians. And as you watch, may the Lord bless you, keep you, and guide you, just as He guided Emma and Shadow through the storm. May His light find you, even in the coldest night, men.